All right, guys, here we are. We are recording this Zoom video conference, and basically we're just trying to put out information to all of our customers as well as other real estate agents that might have questions of how closings are being changed or closing protocols being changed due to the COVID-19 coronavirus lockdown. So we're here with Clifford R. Rhoades, PA, Cliff Rhoades, Laura Vega. So I'm going to turn it over to Cliff at this moment to go ahead and let him introduce himself and Laura and just talk about the changes. So go ahead.
Morning, everyone. Cliff Rhoades here. We are hoping that y'all and praying that y'all are safe and sound and that you're following the protocols that are recommended by government and others for keeping your family, your friends, and your co-workers and others that you come in contact with safe. So follow those protocols. We are doing our best to follow the protocols also, and you'll hear some of that in our discussion this morning. My name is Cliff Rhoades. I'm an attorney practicing in Florida, Sebring, Florida. Been practicing for 40 years. My practice is predominantly real estate, transactional work, with an emphasis on residential closings. With me today is Laura, my assistant of 15 years. She actually closes the deals. I come in and say hello, and I used to shake hands, now I wave. But I'll open the floor up to her now to talk about the evolving protocols that we've put in place here to close transactions. Laura?
Good morning. Obviously, a top priority is one to keep us healthy as well as keeping your buyers and sellers healthy. So as of right now, we would like to have everyone, when they do come to the office for their closing, remain in their vehicle. Once they arrive, to give us a call to let us know that they are here, and we will meet them outside. We will ask them to sanitize prior to us handing them any of the documents that need to be signed. We will still walk them through the documents, of course, answer any questions or concerns that they may have. But again, our priority is to keep them healthy as well as keeping us healthy. They will remain in their vehicle the entire time, all the way through funding. They'll still be able to leave here with their check and or a wire receipt for their wire transfer. So nothing would change other than where they're essentially signing their documents. We'll also set up a table outside. We do have a covered area. Depending on the weather and the time of the day, we may, sign papers out on a table out front. So again, we don't want this to scare any of our buyers or sellers. We still want to be able to close their transaction. We just want to do it safely and make sure that all of the parties are comfortable.
Perfect. So sounds like pretty much business as usual. We're just doing a drive-through closing instead of sitting down at a table.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It is a drive-by closing.
Right.
So far, our protocols have evolved. Last week, we were bringing parties into the office. We're not doing that anymore because we see the enhanced nature of the issue of the coronavirus in Highlands County, and so we're moving with the extent of the risk. But at the end of the day, we see no interruption in closings whatsoever. In other words, we are confident that we will be able to handle every closing that comes along without interruption. We do ask that certainly agents may want to attend the closing, and we have no problem with that, but I think the agent needs to understand what we just talked about. That is that the sellers, buyers will be sitting in their cars, and all things considered, I don't know that it's appropriate for the agent to climb into the back seat of the seller's vehicle. That is your business, but I think we would prefer that you keep a safe distance. We'll be keeping a safe distance, but certainly we are within earshot and sight of the process as it takes place.
And to that note, I can only speak about our own company, but the Elliott team, we're basically just setting the expectations with our customers that we're not going to be, we don't want to make any additional risk. So we're not going to attend closings. We're calling them ahead of time. We're making sure they understand most of the documents that they're signing. And then we're also instilling into them that, you know, they're working with professionals. They're in a law office. If there's any questions, they'll be able to address everything. They'll be well represented. So personally, I haven't had any objection to a customer saying, "Oh, you're not going to be there." So I think that's an easy conversation to have. So moving forward, one of the hotbed topics right now is the force majeure clause on Florida real estate contracts. So I'm going to ask Cliff to just kind of elaborate his interpretation of that clause and how it pertains to today's real estate landscape.
So force majeure is it's a concept, legal concept that is a contractual concept. It's been around for forever. It is a concept that is driven by the particular contract. From a general standpoint, I would commend you to read the white paper that was published recently by the Florida Association of Realtors. It's called COVID-19 and Contract Performance. It's an article that is very well written, and it is beyond force majeure because there are related concepts such as impossibility of performance, or another concept that is called frustration of purpose. Those concepts are contractual concepts that apply to transactions when somebody thinks that some external event has caused them to be unable to perform the contract. Force majeure in the standard Florida realtor / Florida bar contract, it is a provision in section 18G of the contract, and at the outset you will find it when you read it that it merely is an extension of the closing during a period of time where the closing is essentially deemed impossible by the occurrence of some external event. There's a couple of examples in this section. For instance, hurricanes, floods, extreme weather, earthquakes, fire, or other acts of God. Coronavirus 19 is not mentioned in there. We might argue that coronavirus 19 is an act of God, but we can also argue that in and of itself, it doesn't necessarily cause the impossibility of the contract to be closed. Fear of the unknown is not a force majeure argument. Worry about what's going to happen to us 3 months from now is not a valid reason to throw the force majeure clause on the table. The courts there's not a lot of decisions on force majeure, and the reason is it's very limited in its scope. I can cite just a few examples where it has come into play. 9/11, you can imagine a contract for the construction of a building in the immediate vicinity of the World Trade Center. The clause may have been evoked in those instances successfully when the entire neighborhood is in rubble and in dust. Hurricane Andrew may have caused, in the Kendall and Homestead area, may have caused some force majeure issues to be successfully enacted, but it is not an escape hatch for closings generally, and I don't see any instance today where the coronavirus is a reason to invoke the force majeure provision. Yesterday I had a file come in where that somebody is attempting to invoke it, and I'm going to render an opinion today that that the seller will have the right to the deposit if the buyer refuses to close as scheduled. I'm happy to take emails on this issue. There are related issues in the contract. Certainly, if lender delay may be a reason to delay a closing, but I don't think that rises to the level of force majeure. You know, the typical contingencies in the contract. Some have questioned whether we should not let the inspector in the house to inspect the home, and that becomes a reason not to close the transaction. If you can go to the grocery store, I think the inspector can safely conduct an inspection of your home under these circumstances. That's my own personal belief. I haven't tested it in the courts, but that's the way I view force majeure. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, and you can certainly submit questions by email to me, which Norm will publish as part of this presentation.
Yeah, and thank you for that response. And if you are watching this recording, everybody's contact info is right there on their pictures. So at this point, we've got Matt Nelson and Eric Wilson on with me. Do you guys want to pose any questions? It's your opportunity to ask the lawyer as pertains to COVID-19.
I would just ask, what kind of things are we doing, for our buyers and sellers to basically, I don't know if you, bulletproof their contracts? Is there anything, are there any recommendations you have on that point?
Matt, I believe the contract, if we're using the most current version of the Florida Realtor Florida Bar Association contract, it is my view that it needs no massaging whatsoever. It covers, to me, all of the issues that might arise, including those that are COVID oriented.
Okay. So just make sure to hit the dates and things like that, and then, just pay particular attention to it as well.
Focus on the dates. COVID or not, I always like earnest money deposits that are meaningful. And you know what I mean? A $500 earnest money deposit on a contract, to me, is not meaningful. A $5,000 earnest money deposit is. I realize that turns on the circumstances of the transaction, but all things considered, I like COVID or not, I like what I call meaningful earnest money deposits.
All right. Do you foresee any e-signature options in the future for finance deals? Because as of now, they have to be wet signatures.
No, the law of Florida is that you're not going to, let's say you're using a DocuSign program for your contract, that's fine. But for a deed or a mortgage instrument, a DocuSign or similar program or system is not allowed. The seller must sign with ink on the deed, and the buyer must sign with ink on the mortgage instrument. We are looking at remote notarization certifications here in the office, but that's not responsive to your question. We're trying to make it easier for instance, sellers that are in Indiana to sign a deed up there with us notarizing here. That is allowed under Florida law with conditions. The notary must be certified to handle a remote notarization, but wet signatures are still required, and I predict that will not change in the near future.
Do you foresee any time where the recording of deeds would be delayed, or is there any, any kind of hiccup in that?
I received a memo, so did everybody else that is an agent for the Attorney's Title Insurance Fund, from our general counsel, and every clerk of court recorder office in the state of Florida, as of I think last Wednesday or Thursday, remained open, and we're recording instruments. Laura can touch on e-recording. We don't travel to the recorder's office very often. We engage in something called e-recording. If you want to touch on that.
Yeah, everything is transmitted electronically the day of closing. So as long as the recording office remains open and we have access to email, there would be absolutely no delay in recording of any of the instruments.
sounds pretty good. I just want to circle back. So if I heard you correctly, remote notaries, so we could have a signer out of state and use a local notary. Is that what I heard you say?
That is what you heard us say. Once the notary here is certified under the applicable Florida statute, a recent Florida statute, by the way, I think it became law last year?
Last year.
A year ago, the legislature and the governor signed into legislation a provision that allows for certification for remote notaries. It's oddly Facebook, is it called FaceTime?
FaceTime.
And Skype do not
Skype.
work. You have to buy a program that
Imagine
allows for the visual observation by the notary of the person signing the instrument in Michigan or wherever. But
it's FaceTime-esque, where they would virtually video themselves signing while you're watching live
while I'm watching.
Yes.
And then I would notarize their documents.
Yes.
So the having to go out and find a notary would not be an issue and would make mail away closings that much easier.
So you already mentioned the changes in protocol and, you know, the changes that you're making to protect folks from contracting, or even yourself from contracting the virus. Is CRRPA doing any remote closings? Are you sending notaries to, let's say we have an at-risk customer that doesn't want to leave their property? Is that an option at this point, or do we see that as being an option in the future?
It is an option. We're not yet certified. Only after this coronavirus issue came along did we look into the remote notarization, and we find that the providers that supply the software to do this are, as you might imagine, they are way backed up. So we're seeing a backlog in that. Nonetheless, that does not stop us from hiring a notary to attend a closing wherever. And we've been doing that for years.
And that's what I was speaking on. Is maybe
that's
even
not a new concept.
You know, maybe even locally, you know, just having somebody go to a remote location to do signing for folks that are at risk. So great, that's perfect.
We're prepared to do what it takes, as long as it's safe, to get the closing transacted. We are committed to close the transaction even under these circumstances, as long as the procedures and the protocols are in place to make it safe for all that are involved. And I think we can accomplish that.
Perfect. So to be honest, I had a few questions prepped, but you answered most of them in your explanation. So I was just going to ask Matt, Eric, is there anything further that we missed that maybe is a common question that they can answer before we finish up?
No, I think same, answered most of them.
I mean, what can we do as agents to keep the communication lines open, or keep the deals smooth, or, you know, what is there anything we can do for you guys?
I think continue to set the expectations with the buyers and sellers with these new protocols. I think everybody's a little bit nervous and uneasy. It's hard to deal with change. I'll be the first to admit that, you know, with doing things the way that I've done for the last 15 years. And now I'm completely having to do things in a different format to get the job done. So I think that if we just continue to give them comfort and outline those expectations so that they know that, you know, there shouldn't be a delay in their closing, and that we're going to, you know, we're still going to get to the finish line. We just may have to do it a little bit differently to get there. So keep that communication open with your buyers and your sellers, you know, again, with them being nervous. And I think that that would definitely, you know, help us.
Perfect. You guys have anything to add before we finish up?
Keep the contracts coming.
Okay, well, that's a great question. Have you noticed a decline in business?
Actually, no. I'm just as busy today as I was, you know, a month ago, 2 months ago. In fact, we've got 12 on the books this week, with it being a 4-day work week for us. So it's definitely not slowing down, and the contracts are still coming in. So I would continue to work hard as you have been.
Perfect. So, all right. So again, on the screen, everybody has their contact info. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Cliff, Laura, I appreciate you guys taking the time to kind of settle some nerves in an unsettling time, answer some questions that are likely on the minds of most buyers, sellers, and agents. So thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you in the future.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.